Welcome to Forward, a podcast from Hard Knock Press, where we explore the ideas, stories, and conversations that help build better athletes and better people. I'm Kevin Mulhearn, alongside Joe Clemente. Let's get started. Welcome to Forward, a podcast for better athletes and better people. I'm Kevin Mulhearn. My co-host is Coach Joe Clemente. Welcome to episode 4, High School Baseball Today, What Parents Need to Know. A topic near and dear to your heart, I'm sure, Joe.
Oh, yeah.
So, obviously, you've been coaching for years in the Jersey baseball program, Don Bosco Prep. We're not going to focus exclusively on Jersey because hopefully this podcast will reach an audience beyond New Jersey and to other states in this country. So we want to just focus a little bit on the difference between the threshold decisions that kids make. I know in New Jersey, it's a pretty momentous decision as to whether or not to send your kid to play baseball or other sports at a private school, Catholic school, or a public school. And that's a threshold decision right off the bat that you have to make when your child is about in 8th grade. And you really probably need to be thinking about it a lot sooner than that. Probably in 7th grade, you're seeing where his or her development is and making the decision as what's a good fit for this kid athletically, academically, and everything else, right? What do you think parents need to think about when they're making that decision? What are the key things that parents need to focus on?
So most of the time, parents come up to me and they talk to me and they ask me that question, right? How do I know what to choose? Every individual, every athlete's different, okay? I would tell you that my answer to them is always pretty simple, okay? As you know me, I try to keep things simple. First and foremost is grades, right? Like, where are they academically? If they feel like that their academics is where they need to be and they're maturing in the right direction, that could be one of the factors. Most of the time, the factors that parents come to me are always about athletics, right? What do I need to do? Is my kid good enough to play here? Again, talking about what you just said, most of them start, I would say, in middle school. That's when they start to think about it, right? Because they get through that 11U, 12U year, right? The 12U you could actually be in 7th grade and starting to play middle school baseball, which is 60-90, which is on the big field, which you and I both know is a great equalizer. So that will determine athletically, and I'm just talking about baseball right now, of whether or not you start to see the growth physically and the maturity in each athlete. That's really what it comes down to. Again, the answer for the athlete or the parents, it's different for each one, because you have to take each case and say, hey, this is what I see, this is what we know, add it all up and figure out the equation and then go from there. That's really what it comes down to.
And when you agree that there's also a matter of what level of risk is acceptable for you, because let's face it, it's a hell of a lot riskier sending your kid to play baseball in New Jersey at one of the top private schools, Don Bosco Prep, Del Barton, St. Joe's, Bergen Catholic, DePaul. Those schools are all powerhouses. They have many kids playing Division I baseball, many kids playing Division II and III baseball. Those are really tough programs to play in. And there's a risk factor going in. I can tell you it's interesting. When Dennis was 12, he was at 6th or 7th grade, I think. He played on the team, Clarkstown Stars Red Team, coached by Brian O'Hare. That was a very strong team. And that was when I first started even thinking about private school, because Mike Rooney, I was introduced to him by Brian and knew that he was the head coach of Don Bosco. Brian also extolled the virtues of the Bosco baseball program, saying it was the best program in the area, and it's something that Dennis should think about a possibility of playing. So Mike actually had a chance to watch Dennis play. At the end of the year, I came up to Mike and I said, Mike, does my kid have a chance to play baseball at Don Bosco Prep for you if he goes there? And Mike gave me a really honest answer. He said, Kevin, I can't tell you he's going to be good enough to play or start on my varsity team. I just can't predict that. I don't know. Too early to say. He's 13 years old, and I can't tell you what the future holds on that. I can tell you that he's going to be good enough to play on the freshman team. He'll make the freshman team, and I'm sure he'll play some. That was it. That was the extent of the promise that he made. And I have to tell you, I really appreciated that he was not blowing smoke up my ears, that he was telling me how it is. This is a tough program. I got really good kids. Your kid might play, he might not play. And that was the challenge that we as a family faced, to say, okay, you want to roll the dice here and see what happens. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees in public school either. You go to public school and you could sit in a public school and not make a team. It's very competitive. Some of the public school teams, especially in Bergen County, are extremely strong. The Catholic school decision is one that you really have to have some level of acceptance of risk. And your kid could be a great player. Your kid could be all state eventually, and still not be able to start right away or even at all for one of these private school powerhouses. Just the way it is. So as I look at it, what do you tell a parent who is thinking about sending his kid to a private school when his kid is 7th and 8th grade and showing some talent for baseball?
Here's the thing, right? You were talking about New Jersey. Let's just focus on Jersey. I'm in the mix, right? You and I have been. Your son played there, so let's talk about Jersey. The North Jersey area, whether it's private, right, parochial, or public. Okay, the baseball there, it's like a small little mecca of being in the big North is a huge deal. I'm a little biased, right? Maybe you are too, but that's definitely one of the best conferences in the country.
Yep.
Okay, and I think that's proven. Okay, and I'm talking about not just about wins and losses, but I'm talking about the amount of kids that go to college, the amount of kids that are on the draft board that may get drafted. Okay. First thing you got to do is you got to tip your cap to all the programs, all the coaches, and be like, to set that standard is hard. I know Runes, the standard is way up here, okay? And that's been set there for a long time. And that's been set, the bar has been set from the kids that continue to come into the program, right? So going to a 7th or an 8th grade parent, right, and saying, when they ask, again, coming back to, everybody always asks that question. Is my kid going to play there? Because first of all, it comes down to money. Let's be honest, okay? What you're investing in is not only, you're looking at this like the education side is great, but my public school, some of these public schools are phenomenal, right?
Yep.
Academically. So now you're sitting here going, okay, if I'm going to sit here and I'm going to spend 20, 30 grand a year, okay, maybe more, right, at this program, I need to make sure that my kid's going to get an opportunity to play. But there are no guarantees, like you said, okay? And unfortunately, there's a risk. And that's what I tell these guys. Look, you might be the best player in your town. You might be the best player in the All-Stars. You might be the best player in your club team. But when you go to a parochial school, or especially in the big North, they're all the best players. Right? And that's the hardest thing that parents have to deal with. Nobody wants to hear that, Kev. Nobody wants to hear that your kid, oh my God, he was the best for the last 3 years at 11U, 12U, 13, 14. And then all of a sudden you show up on campus, you're like, whoa, there's 70 kids trying out that are just as good, if not better than I am.
And honestly, sometimes it's a matter of luck. I mean, if you are an outfielder and you have 3 stud outfielders who are there in your class or below, you're blocked. That's it. You're done. And that could happen. But what I'm saying, if you get blocked behind 3, super talented D1 caliber kids, you could be a really good player and not be able to get on the field just because you blocked. I know that happened. There was a kid who was a friend of his father's a friend of mine, played on Wadika's team for a couple of years. Great kid, super athlete, great soccer player as well as a baseball player. And he went to Del Barton, and he had very sporadic playing time. He got on the field a little bit. He played some, but only his senior year and only a little bit, not full time. And he was a good enough athlete that he got a Division I scholarship at a Patriot League school, really good school, and playing Division I baseball on scholarship, and still had a tough time cracking the lineup at Del Barton. It just shows you how crazy good Del Barton team is. That kid wasn't a 2-year or 3-year starter from the get-go. It's just not that easy. And it has nothing to do with how hard he worked or how talented he was. Sometimes you get bad luck and you get behind somebody who's better than you. That's just how it is. That's life. But it's a reality that is difficult. I know we talked about this with Don Bosco. There are so many good kids on that team who don't start, who get minimal playing time, and they're really good ball players. And it hurts the coaches to see kids who are really good not get a full opportunity to play. But it's a zero-sum game. You can only have 9 guys play at a time. It is what it is. You got to make your selections, have your 9 starters, and run with it. But the playing time issue for private schools is really a difficult one because it's a really challenging thing for a kid to be able to go to one of these powerhouse schools and play. And I think what a parent has to do is realize, accept the fact that there's a possibility that as good as my little Johnny is, that little Johnny's going to be sitting behind some other kid who's just maybe a tad better, or who the coaches perceive as being a tad better. He might not even be better. He just might be someone who the coaches think is better. And that's the only opinion that counts, right? You can watch your kid and say, oh, man, my kid's the next Willie Mays. But if your kid sees him as but the coaches in the high school team see him as a 4th best outfielder, he's not going to play. And you as a parent, when you send your kid to a private school, I think you have to send it with a mindset that there's a possibility that my kid's not going to play as much as I want him to play. I
tell everybody when they come up, right? If you're going to go to Bosco, I'm using Bosco, right? But any of the parochials, I'm sure they're in the same boat. If you're going to go to Bosco, make sure you're going to the school because you love it academically, you love being there, you want to be on campus, you love the brotherhood, all the extra stuff. Because there is a chance you may not make a team, or you may make a team and
Joe,
not play.
If I can interrupt for a second, but isn't the case that a lot of guys go to Bosco for the primary purpose of playing the sport they want to play?
100%. But that's why. But that's us as coaches. Like we have to let them know that, right? Like I think that's me being nice, saying, "Hey, listen, make sure you like the school because there is a chance that you may not make the team, or you may not be happy with your role on the team."
And one thing that Bosco does, which I found fascinating and really interesting, was after tryouts, they have an actual piece of paper which outlines the role that they anticipate you having for that team. I think the categories are starting spot, fighting for a starting spot, minimal playing time. You're going to be a backup, and then there's the last category, which is we don't see any role for you on this team. You won't play. And they actually say that. I remember Nick Bombaco got that letter as a junior. He got the letter, you're not going to be playing at all. And when Nick's father, Dean, got that, he was apoplectic because he wants his kid playing baseball.
Yeah.
And Nick is a damn good player.
Yep.
But I'll say this, and I used that Bombaco story as fuel for Dennis when he was sitting at Union College this past year, the first 20 games. Nick Bombaco, his dad, kept that piece of paper in his pocket. And he kept telling his son, go out there and just work your butt off and get better and show the coaches that they're wrong and that you need to be playing. And when you know it, Nick, he started hitting the ball like crazy in practice. He got the attention of the coaches. He said, hey, this kid's a really good hitter. They put him in a game. I remember he got a hit against a public school early in the season, came up with the bases loaded and a triple left center field. All of a sudden, he started getting some opportunities. They actually took him off the you're not going to play list paper that he got early in the season, and he started earning himself a role, and a significant role.
Well, think about that, right? If you're a player like that has talent, but has just been told, like, hey, there's really no role for you, like you only have one of two choices, right? You can either go hide in the corner, right? Or you can go out there and you can prove us wrong.
But I say it says a lot about a kid's character. A piece of paper that says you're not going to play this year at all. That's what the letter said for all intents and purposes. To get that letter and just to keep going out there and busting it and knocking through the door, it takes a lot of character. I know tons of kids who would get that letter and said, okay, I'm going to start going fishing after my games. I'm going to just relax and not go for the extra batting practice, not go for the extra weight work. Just it is what it is. I'm going to be a substitute, and I'll deal with it. Maybe next year I'll play a little bit.
You want guys who want to compete all the time, right? I'll tell you a funny story about Runes real quick, just going back to about competitors, right? So We were at summer camp, right? I've been doing summer camp. This actually was the first year that I didn't have a chance to do it because Joey was out playing. He got invited to a bunch of higher level stuff, 17U. So I was traveling and I missed it. I missed the camp. But I remember, now you got to think about this, like how clued in Mike Rooney is to baseball and kids. And so they would go to camp for like the first half, do all their skill work, stuff like that. And then we go to lunch. Everybody would eat and kids would then come out afterwards. Okay. And Skip would sit there. Okay. Not saying anything. He'd eat his lunch. Everybody eat his lunch. And then you'd have a bunch of the kids who would go into the dugout or go sit against the fence or go sit in the shade and stuff like that. And then you'd have like your handful of guys, like kids that would be like out on the field, like playing catch and running around. But we would never say anything. And there was a reason we would never say anything because Skip would say to us, he's like, I want the kids that want to be on the field all the time. All the time. See the kids, and it's not making them wrong. It's not saying those kids are bad kids or anything, but there's just when you start to look at the type of athletes or the type of kids that you need to be in that program, you want kids that want to compete. He wants kids. All these coaches want kids that want to compete all the time. And that's the difference. Those are some of the things that you asked me earlier about talking to parents and kids about parochial and public, right? What is the difference? I'm telling you right now, if you're going to a parochial school, you got to be ready to compete every day, every pitch, everything that you do, you better be ready to compete because the guy next to you is. And some parents don't understand that. And I'm not trying to be rude about that, but they live in this bubble, right? And they live in this town that they've always been the best. And they've never really had to compete like that all the time. I'm not saying they don't compete. I'm saying they don't do it all the time. That's the difference, right? Think about it. Think about how many nights that Dennis came home, right? And you were like, hey, great job, but you got to keep pushing. You got to keep pushing, right?
As a parent, honestly, I was worried about him being benched until the very end of senior year. I honestly, I never felt really solid or confident that he was going to have a starting role, get his 3 at-bats a game every single game. I was always worried that one bad spell, a bad play, a bad error, an 0 for 10 spot is going to put him on the bench. It's hard to, and that was me as a parent thinking. I don't know if Dennis felt that way himself, but I think I'm certain that he knew he had pressure on him, that there was some guys just chomping at the bit waiting to get in and take over his role if they could. But it makes for a tenuous season when you're not sure that your kid's going to be playing and it's that competitive. That is always a possibility that he's going to wind up sitting on the bench. And there are a lot of kids who are really good players who get benched or who don't crack the starting lineup, who will not see the field nearly as much as you would like them to as their parent. And that happens too. Sometimes, sometimes the best thing for the child is to leave the private school and go play at a public school, correct?
Yeah, 100%. Not every program, not every kid is built for every program, right? You as a parent, you try to do the best, try to make the best decision to help your kid out. And that's in any sport, right? We're not just talking about baseball now. And you want to put them in an environment where they're going to succeed, right? But ultimately, it doesn't make them any less of an athlete or a player if they go to a parochial school and they're like, hey, this is just not for me. Right? Doesn't make them a bad person. It's just not their thing, right? Like maybe they didn't feel like they fit in. Maybe you were talking about a blockage, right? It's stacked so far, like they're looking for opportunity, whatever it might be, right? So again, there's a ton of public schools out there that are really good. And I was going to say to you earlier, talking about these two, and again, a little biased, right? Being in the Big North.
Yep.
I think that the baseball in the Big North or with all the parochial schools, even Delby, Pope John, all those schools in the area, okay? St. Peter's, the bottom line is they've made the public schools better. And what I mean by that is public schools that are going to play against the parochials, they know what they're up against. And there's no coach out there that wants to go out and get beaten up by one of these teams. So I got to tip my cap to the coaches in the public schools in the area, especially, like they've done a tremendous job raising the bar for their players and their school, because there's no easy win. Like, you remember back in the day when it was like, oh, I'm going to go play, Bosco's going to go play so-and-so. Oh, man, dude, that's a stat day. Right? Someone's going 4 for 4 with 3 homers and a double, right? There's no more of that. And like I said, you got to pay homage to the coaches in the local programs that I've seen, that there is no easy win. There's a fight. And every time that, I would guess that this is the same, not just for Bosco, but for Joe's, or any of the parochials, that every time that they go and play a public, they're getting their best. Like, I'm going to tell you right now that I know for a fact there is no easy win. Like, and every public school that we go play, like, they are putting their ace on the bump as long as he's available, or whatever their best is available, and they're hunting for us. And I love it. And I tell my guys that. But ultimately, like, there's no slouch, right, in the area anymore.
And that's, in my mind, the biggest difference between private schools and public schools as far as talent differentiation is pitching depth. Don Bosco had 2025 team. They had 7 or 8 kids who were all aces on a lot of public school teams. The 7th or 8th kid on the depth chart could have been an ace in most public schools in the area. They were that good pitching wise. The public schools that I see, most of them have, the really good programs have one standout pitcher. Ultipan had a Selden Kokabek kid this year, was tremendous.
Yeah, he was lights out.
As good as any pitcher in the state, really. He was terrific. But after that, there's usually a fall off in the depth of the pitching, which makes it interesting, because you play a tournament like the Bergen County tournament, especially when they space out the games like they have the last couple of years.
Yep.
If you can ride your ace, public school teams can play with the big boys. They can play with the private schools if they're riding their ace, and they can pitch every game. You pitch the quarterfinal, you can pitch the semifinal, you can pitch the finals. You have three weeks of games. You could put your ace against the private schools every game. It's going to be very competitive games. In the public schools, they've beaten the private schools a number of times the last couple of years in those tournaments under that framework. The difficulty is if you have to go deep into a tournament, if you're playing 2 or 3 games in a week and you need to go 4 or 5 pitching deep. That's where I think, from my mindset, that was the differentiation, that the private school pitching depth was so much more than the public school pitching depth. Usually the public schools, after the first 2 pitchers, there was a pretty significant drop-off at number 3. Bosco had a kid this year, Thomas Collins, was All-State. He wasn't even in the top 3 or 4 guys in the rotation the year before. Now, you could argue that maybe he certainly had the talent to pitch at that level, but he wasn't. He just didn't pitch those kind of games as a junior. He waited till his senior year to actually have that role. But I'm sure when Tommy was a junior, and if he was playing at any public school, they would have been salivating having that kid take the mound every 5th day.
Every 5th day.
So,
I throw him out there as much as I can.
So it's the difference. And there were kids for pitches. There were pitchers who I saw at Don Bosco Prep who were really outstanding pitchers, really good, and had tough time getting more than 7-10 innings of work in the private school system. They just couldn't find the innings because they were really good, but there were other kids who were really good too.
When you talk about that, I don't mean to jump in, but when you talk about it, again, we keep talking about what differentiates public, private, all that good stuff, okay? Even though all of the recruiting nowadays, especially with the NCAA rules and all that stuff with August 1st for the juniors, right? Almost all the recruiting is done in the summer, okay? That's fair to say. When you win, okay, in these county tournaments and the state tournaments, college coaches are going to see those teams because there's something there, right? They're going there to see somebody, okay? When you take a look at, and again, Bosco, and you go down the line, right? The job, again, what Mike Rooney and these guys, Jimmy and Dwyer, Jalaya, all these guys have done is that there are kids that, like you said, that play minimally on the field during the season, but they're playing in college. There's a reason for that. And I had the honor to be able to talk to a bunch of college coaches this summer because, again, Joey got invited to some of that stuff. And it was cool because they said to me, they were like, when I see Don Bosco Prep, when I see St. Joe's, when I see Bergen, all of them, Del Barton, right? Again, we like to say all the names, but it's all the parochials in the area. When we see that, we know what type of program they're coming from. We know what we can expect.
I mean, there's a lot of great private school teams. St. Peter's Prep, Pope John.
Yeah.
These are all tough teams. Every game against these teams are wars.
They are battles for, we know that going into it. But again, the college coaches, so like, you're going to know that, hey, if so-and-so is on the roster, if Mike Rooney chose this kid, there's a reason. You and I both know that. There's a reason. Okay? And even though he didn't play a lot, there's as we always talk about, character is a huge that's a huge component in how we choose kids, right? And like a lot of athletes, there's a misconception, right? It's always skill, right? How good am I? How fast can I run? But at our school, character, that's one of the largest things that we look at.
And if you're thinking long term, I think you need to be patient. Your kid's time is going to come. It might not come at the timetable that you want, but his time will come. Because certainly the work that they do and the training and coaching and teaching that goes on there is extraordinary. And the funny thing is when Don Bosco Prep is playing a playoff game, all the coaches are in the dugout, and Mike likes to stack his coaching staff. So the freshman coaches are there. You know, Chevy's there, Brian Makeley's there, you're there.
We're all there.
Vic Santos is there sometimes. And there's five coaches on the varsity team to begin with. So you look at that, there's almost more coaches than players in some of the games. It is funny to watch, but you realize, and I realize as a parent now, with a little perspective, because my kid's over a year out, the commitment, the coaching commitment to those kids from those private schools, and particularly Don Bosco, but I'm sure the same is true of some of the other private schools in the area, is extraordinary. The commitment that these coaches, including you, give to these kids is remarkable. And that's a benefit that goes beyond the scoreboard, beyond the playing time decisions, beyond the stats. You're getting your kid to be worked on and developed by a really good group of guys who are looking to build, number one, his character, number two, his performance. But the character always is king, always. And I love that about the private school system, that these coaches are building men. They are not just coaching boys. And that's the one thing. I'm writing my own book about the 2025 Don Bosco Prep Championship season.
Can't wait.
It's called Iron.
Can't wait, man. Let's get it done.
Iron Men is the name of the book. Eventually it'll be out there. But my realization is that's what these guys were doing. That's what you and the coaches at Don Bosco were doing. They were building men. They were taking boys and molding them and shaping them into and not just men, but strong men. And we're a society that has put the boot on the strong men in a lot of areas, in a lot of arenas. It's harder and harder to be a boy today than I think it ever has been. And this is one pocket of a group of men who are committed to these kids like they're their own sons. And I could see it. I could see how much, when I sat down, I had 3 or 4 hour conversations with all the varsity coaches, and I just saw the passion they have for what they do and how much they love it and how important it is to them. And as a dad who's sitting back, again, with perspective, I really appreciate that, because you just don't find that everywhere.
I definitely think it's a mutual respect, right? If the players are willing to put in the time and effort, then us as coaches, we want to develop them and get them to be successful and get everything out of them, right? I am going to turn around and talk about the public school guys, and not to harp on it, but I have to, again, we need to tip our cap to them, because ultimately, most of the time going into a parochial school, we get some of the best talent in the area, okay? And unfortunately, that means that we're taking players from those public schools. Now, again, there's always situations, right? Mike has done a tremendous job building this program, and we should get the best players because we're the best program. So ultimately, those public school coaches, they have to deal with a lot of adversity. So again, I don't want, as biased as we are about parochials, just because we're in it, I want everybody out there to know that the public school coaches, they don't have it easy, right? And they try to do everything that they can. And think about this. You were talking about this earlier, right? If they only got 2 arms, right, they have to manage the game to the point of where we got to figure out how we're going to go in and compete in the counties and the states, and we got 2 arms, right? 2 premium arms.
They all have more than 2 arms. It's just that there's a drop off often after the first 2 arms.
Yeah, they're not gonna have our guys as like their 3, 4, and 5. Like you were just talking about O'Hare,
Right.
right? If he's our 3 guy, 4 guy, like most public schools are not gonna have that.
No.
But again, I just want the public school coaches that are out there listening to this to know that, hey, like we have a ton of respect for you, right? And for what you do. And I tip my cap to you guys because it's not easy. And I have a lot of friends that coach in the public school rank in the realm, and it's not easy. And for what they've done, it's nothing short of extraordinary.
And the Bergen County public schools are an outstanding group. There's three of the state champions this year in public schools from the state of New Jersey come from Bergen County.
Yeah.
I think Oltapan, Ramsey, I think Westwood, maybe.
Yeah, my buddy Chris Roof, I just saw the last weekend. Haven't seen each other for quite a while because he's the head coach of Governor Livingston. He's done a phenomenal job down there, and he's been there for a long time. And you know what? The culture there, like we talked about it for a while. Like is
Governor Livingston a public school or private?
It's public.
Public.
Yeah.
They were undefeated a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they were a win away from winning the whole thing. They won the section, I think, this year. Right. And but for the last couple of years, like they've continued to grow. But again, it's taken him a while. But again, he's relentless. He strives for his kids, and we had a really good conversation. He's an awesome coach, awesome dude. And again, tipping my cap to these guys that kids are leaving their program to go to a parochial, right? So we're very fortunate. I'm a little biased. I'm good with that.
But remember a couple of years ago we played Morris Knowles. They had Luke Dickerson, who was one of the best players in the state.
That kid was a stud, right?
Unbelievable.
Stud.
Great hockey player, too.
Yep.
And they also had a really strong pitching staff. I think they had a kid, James Kahn, who played for Complete Performance. Really good. That was one of the best games of the year. We had a game against Morris Knowles. I think we won 2-1. Ryan Calvero pitched the game of his life that game. But they had some lineup. It's a public school. And they gave us everything we could take. They were really good. A lot of the public schools are really good. A lot of the public schools in Bergen are really good. Rampo's program is always good.
I train a bunch of guys from Ridgewood. They play for us. They won it this year.
Pascack Valley.
Yeah.
So Ridgewood is the 3rd state champion. I think Ridgewood, Oltapan.
Oltapan.
Yeah.
Look at the program he's got there. He works hard.
Yeah, I used to sneak onto his field with Dennis and Dylan Espinal and Elio. We would go.
Oh, you're the reason why they have those signs out there now, right? Trespassing.
We are the reasons. So a couple of times he came there, and Elio would say, "Hey, I pay taxes. I pay school taxes in this area." And he was pretty cool about it. He knew
Byron's cool, dude.
He knew who we were. We weren't looking to desecrate the field. We were just looking to take a little BP. So, but there was funny a couple of times on that.
He's a true baseball guy. Like he's all in.
Old school.
Yeah, old school for sure. Yeah, that was last week, right?
Last week's episode. But the interesting thing too, if you look at some point, if you're at a private school and you're there to play baseball, that's your primary goal, and you're not playing or you're blocked, and you're told by the coaches you're not going to be playing, at that point, is that something that you would recommend that you should seriously consider transferring to a public school?
So listen, again, I think every athlete or every kid is different, right? I think you need to take a look at the whole situation and say, okay, what's best for my kid? And get their input, right? Because they got to feel comfortable too.
And as part of it depends on the public school too. If you're going to a public school that has a really strong program where they're all good baseball players and your kid's going to play in a competitive team, that's one thing. If you're going to a school where they were 2-18 the previous year, it's quite another. You got to make that decision. I guess that's part of the impact is to where you're going. And you also have the ability to transfer to another private school, from private school to private school. That happens too, right?
Yeah, you get one, right? You get one free one as a varsity guy.
And the rule changed from when Dennis started as a freshman. It used to be, I think, you had to sit out 30 days if you transferred to another private school, and that 30-day rule disappeared, right?
I think that between you and I think it wasn't just parochial to parochial. I
Okay.
think you got one transfer, and you could transfer whenever you wanted. But if you transferred, the old rule was 30-day sit. So
Right.
what a lot of kids did was it was your first varsity, like whatever sport you played. So a lot of those kids, what they would do is they play baseball. They end up playing something in the fall or in the winter, which was varsity. They would sit the 30 days and be able to come back and play baseball. But what they ended up doing, I think, was whatever sport you played varsity was the 30-day sit or something like that. Okay. So, of course, there were different things that you could do to get around it. Once they changed that, it's you get one free transfer.
And this is just a couple of years ago they changed, right?
Yeah. So you've seen like people use this now as like a strategic move.
There's a kid who transferred from Bosco to St. Joe's he was a junior in Bosco, and he transferred and played at St. Joe's as a senior. I saw that, and there was no sit. He didn't have to sit. He
Nope.
didn't have to. He went right into the season, and any kid could transfer to any school. You don't see it a lot, though, do you?
No.
Yeah.
So I think you see more of the transfers from the sub-varsity guys, right? Because they kind of read the writing on the wall. And again, it doesn't make anybody a bad person. It's just when you look down the line, right? It's like, okay, you have kids that started as freshmen, JV, right? Or you have some guys that went from freshman to varsity, and you just start to look at the roster and you're saying, okay, does this work? Am I the type of player that I'm okay with being here, practicing all the time, getting limited playing time, and then getting an opportunity in the summer to go to a college? Or am I the type of athlete that's like, hey, listen, I want to work really hard, but I need to play. I want to be on the field because I'll get bored if not.
It's fascinating. Everybody has their own decision to make.
Yeah.
I know from our experience at Bosco, there was a kid, I'm not going to say his name, but he's a great kid, love his family too. And he was a really good hitter on the team as a freshman and JV player. He had a really rough junior year. He was beset with a significant injury to his shoulder. And once his shoulder healed, he just really couldn't crack the lineup. And when he got his limited playing time, just didn't have a great season, just didn't perform at his level. And it was really disappointing that this is a kid who may have been one of our best hitters the first 2 years of the program. And as a junior, he had a really disappointing season. And that kid had a decision to make. He said, okay, I can go pretty much anywhere I want. I think St. Joe's would have loved to have him. I know he knew the coaches of St. Joe's, and I think they were salivating at the prospect of getting this kid. And he just said, no, these are where my friends are. This is the program I'm in. I want to keep fighting and contribute to this program. And he wound up having a really good senior year. He started off like a house on fire in the spring, hitting in Florida from day one, and had a really good season and played and contributed significantly to the state championship team. But he had a decision making after junior year. Do I bail or do I stay? And for him, it was stay. And I'm really happy that he made the decision. I think he's happy about it too. But it wasn't an easy decision. There was a balancing as to really what should I do here, because the junior year was so disappointing and so much less than what he wanted it to be. And there are other kids who decide to leave. And sometimes for them, that's the right decision too. It's really a personal decision that changes. There's so many variables and circumstances that go into that. But they're hard decisions. But one thing I say as a parent, it's good that your child starts learning how to make adult decisions at a young age. The decision of what college to go to was a big decision in one's life. To be able to have input in that decision is great. To be able to decide whether you're going to go to one high school to play baseball or stay at another school, or stay at the school that you're currently attending, these are big decisions. And we as parents, we're trying to teach our kids, especially the boys, how to become independent, free-thinking men. And it helps that it's not easy, but at the same time, it's really positive to be put in a position where you have to make these important decisions and reason your way through it and figure out what's important to you, what's not important to you, what level of risk you're willing to take, or what level of risk you're not willing to take. And I love the fact, I love the fact that Mike Rooney, when Dennis was going to Bosco, did not promise anything. He didn't promise a starting spot. He didn't promise a spot on the varsity team. He didn't promise nothing except the chance to play on the freshman team. That was it. And I love that. And I remember having a conversation with my kid about that. I said, this is going to be a challenge, and there's no guarantees here. I think if you had asked me before freshman year, what's the chance that your kid's going to be starting player at Bosco, I probably would have said at best 50-50, at best. There was a real good chance that he was not going to be able to start at Don Bosco. And we were okay with that. It was part of the dynamic was this is a tough program, and we know it, and we're pushing ourselves and we're challenging ourselves, and it may or may not work out. And you have to be willing to accept that sometimes, to take a challenge of one of these powerhouse private school programs.
Yeah. When the ruling came out, you get one free transfer, right, on varsity. As a sub-varsity guy, you could go whenever you want, right? But as being able to get that, it gives kids opportunities that feel like, hey, listen, I'm not going to get a look. And some kids need to be on the field in order to get that opportunity to play at the next level, right? That's just the way it is. So again, I don't think it's not personal from our standpoint from Bosco. We just want you to do what's best for you. We're not going to say, hey, listen, you need to leave or you don't need to leave. That's a decision, like you said, tough decisions that are going to have to be made by the athlete, the kid, and then the parents, of course. We stand by with whatever the kid decides, but they are going to know like where they're at. They need to know that, because if we didn't tell them that, then it wouldn't be fair.
Well, and you've seen kids who have talked to Bosco coaches and were told, we don't really see you having a huge role here playing time wise, and they make a decision to go to a different school and have wild success at the next school.
Absolutely.
I've seen that too. And to those kids, I tip my hat as well. You realize that you're in a situation where you have to make an adjustment and make a change, and you make it work for you. Sometimes I think if you leave a private school, it's hard, but also I think it serves as fuel. I think you play with a chip on your shoulder the rest of your career, that you want to show everybody that you are good enough to play for this kind of program.
Well, think about that. It takes a lot of courage to have to walk away also.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're going back to your public school, you're going to catch a ton of grief, right? Oh, you couldn't hack it, you couldn't take it. So now you got to wear it. You got to have that chip, because now I'm going to go show you, hey, listen, the reason why I was there and the reason why I didn't play wasn't because I wasn't good enough.
Right.
It's just where the clog was. And there was kids better than me, or what coaches.
Or again, kids who the coaches perceived were better than
exactly.
me. It doesn't necessarily mean they were better than you. It means that the coaches thought they were better than you.
What they decided, right. Exactly. So, it takes a lot of courage for kids to be able to walk away, get into a situation where they know there's going to be a ton of pressure, right? Whether it's at a public or they go to another parochial, okay? And those kids that go there and are successful, tip our cap, right? Okay, we'd love to see that because you made the right decision. And again, that's why we say there's really no right and wrong until you get to a point where I think you become a junior and you got to pull the trigger one way or the other, right? And I think one of the things that you had said earlier that played a huge role is the friends thing, right? So I know that and I see it all the time, that my two boys that are going to parochial school, right? In the summer, they're hanging out with their buddies in town, and they're all like, hey, why are you not with us? Why are you not coming to school with us? Why are you not coming to, this would be incredible. Like you'll start on football varsity. You'll start on baseball varsity. And we need you. And they keep pulling them in. So it's not easy. And they're like, I've made that decision to walk away from you guys. Not that we're not friends, but I just have to do what's better for me. Right. And what I feel like I need to do to better myself. These are not easy decisions.
No. But they're adult decisions that kids are starting to be making at an early age, and they're something that's a good training ground for making adult decisions when you're actually an adult.
Builds character, right? Yeah. Builds character. 100%.
I wanted to talk to you for a little bit about the reclassing issue. People who don't know, reclassing is getting pretty popular in New Jersey, where a kid will take his 8th grade year and repeat it and basically defer high school for a year and go to a reclassing school. There's a bunch of good schools. I'm not going to say any of them, the names, but there are a bunch of good schools where they offer a program of 1 year kind of private tutorials to bridge the gap between 8th grade and high school. So basically, what it does is it gives you a year extra development before you start high school, which really helps the private school powerhouse baseball programs, that extra year development. And I want to talk to you about something. We were talking about the need for reclassing and why it's being done. There was a book by Malcolm Gladwell, it was a bestseller in 2008. It's called Outliers, The Story of Success. And he talked at length about Canadian hockey programs, youth programs, where there was a disproportionately high level of success by kids who were born January, February, and March of a particular year. Because the cutoff date in hockey in Canada is January 1st. So he's saying when kids are 9 to 10 years old, there's a huge gap between a kid who's born, say, in January 10th and a kid who's born December 15th. There's a year development difference. And what happens is that the coaches look at these 9 and 10-year-old kids who are older and bigger, stronger, and they equate that as more talented. So they pluck those kids out of the program. They put them into the All-Stars. They start giving them better equipment. They start giving them more advanced training. And all of a sudden, the innate biological advantages they have from being older are enhanced even more by the additional training they get from that spot. And he tracked it all the way to professional hockey, that in the professional hockey ranks, there was a disproportionately high number of kids born the first 3 or 4 months of the year. This was 2008 with this book. He did a follow-up study, and they called that RAE, relative age effect. They did a follow-up study, Malcolm Gladwell did in 2022, and they checked the hockey stats for birthdays in 2022, and he found that pretty much the same statistics applied. So nothing had changed in the 15 or so years between the time he wrote his book, Outliers, and 2022.
That's crazy.
But it's real. There's a real advantage to being early on the cycle.
No doubt.
What the reclassing does, it takes away that disadvantage if you're born in the bottom half of the year. My son was born October 28th. So if he went to Bosco in the class of 2024, he would have been giving up 10, 12, 14, 15 months to a bunch of kids. And that matters. And that's a big competitive disadvantage going in if you're giving up that kind of development and growth. There's an 18-year-old kid is usually a lot stronger than a 17-year-old kid. And a 19-year-old kid is a lot stronger than an 18-year-old kid. So that extra year really helps. Dennis reclassed a lot of the kids on Bosco 2025 team, reclassed. I know your son Joey reclassed.
Yep.
These are things that parents should think about. And I have to tell you, when I first broached this subject with my wife, it was like, come hell or high water, we're not going to do this to our kid.
That's everybody.
And when I think about it, what convinced Dennis's mom to say yes to the reclassing notion was COVID came, and the whole year was a cluster. It was just a mess.
That's what we ran into too.
And we figured, you know what, with the kids not even going to school in person, let's just reclass. It makes more sense at that point. But I'm telling you, I would have regretted not reclassing him. And I'm really happy that I was able to convince Roxanne to do that, because it not only helps you from a competitive standpoint as an athlete, but socially, especially boys. Boys are slower developing emotionally, intellectually, every metric. Boys lag behind girls as far as development. And that extra year, it gives the kid that extra year to grow in all phases of life: emotional growth, intellectual growth, physical growth, confidence, all these things. So I'm a big proponent of reclassing if circumstances are right, especially if your kid is born in the tail end of the academic year. What's your view on that? I know you're a reclassing proponent because you sent your own kid through the program of reclassing.
Yeah, it was the best thing that we ever did for him, for sure. He was always like.
Well, did you have resistance from Franny about it, or was she on board?
I think so. Again, you talk about COVID, right? Joey was stuck in that COVID, that world too, and like he missed so much, right? Like he missed so much that year and a half that I think academically we were already on board. Like, we got to figure this out. And then finding out, like figuring out, like, hey, like I saw all the players at Bosco, right, that were reclassing and how successful they were, and it got to a point where the it was always about colleges. Okay, let me revisit this, and you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. So everybody was always worried about the draft, and college coaches always wanted the younger player, always wanted the younger player. That wasn't true. They wanted the best player, right? They always want the best player, the bigger, faster, stronger. So when reclassing started to come into play, we took a look at this, and I was like, listen, like I guess everybody calls it a gap year, if that makes sense, right? Because it's the gap. But that was the best thing we ever did. He matured not only academically, athletically, physically, again, everything that you said, his confidence. And after what he had actually been through at a younger age with all this stuff, right? Of course, with the book, how the book started, it just did wonders for him. Like, I would definitely say to people, if you're going to go to a high level program and you have an opportunity to reclass, like especially in a parochial, like I would say that it's almost, I don't want to say that everybody has to do it, but it's almost a necessity nowadays because the kids that you're up against are so much more physical, if that makes sense. And I'm just talking about sports wise. Academically, it's going to give you that extra year. Like what was cool about that for, I don't know if you've found this out with Dennis, but for Joey, like he already did almost his entire freshman year. So like in the gap year, like all the work and all that stuff. So when he got to Bosco and he was like, Dad, this is awesome. He's like, I already know all this stuff. I was like, and he did really well. So to me, I was like, that was worth it. Just that being able to do well academically.
Yeah.
And then you got on the field and you saw how the physicality shows up on the field, how hard he hits the baseball, throws, like all of those things that coaches are looking for. So I would 100% tell anybody that is thinking about it, especially I don't mean to say it like this, but I know the moms sometimes, like because of the academic side, I think that it's a necessity if you're almost like if you're going to these schools and you're not, again.
Well, I don't think the moms are resisting because of the academics. I think the moms just see it like almost like a demotion, like you're being left back from school.
I see that too.
Yeah.
I see that too. But most of the questions I get are from the moms. They'll always come to me like, "Hey, coach, what do you think? What do you think?"
Saying the fathers are usually gung ho about
the fathers
reclassing.
are usually like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it." Because in their mind, they're like, "Hey, bigger, faster, stronger." I think, again, I'm not stereotyping anybody, please, but I'm going to say that I think the men look more at the athletic side, and the women look more at the academic side, and also the social the social side, like their friends
Right.
and all that good stuff, because that's what moms do, right? They want to make sure that their kids are in an environment where they're going to succeed. So,
Well, when you think about it, it is hard socially because you're basically getting ripped out of the class where your
Yeah.
kids have been going to school for 8 years, in the 8th grade.
100%.
So all of a sudden, you're now in a different class with different kids.
I know people that are going back.
For Dennis, who was going to a different school anyway, that wasn't so much a factor because he's going to a different school, was going to have to make friends from different areas as well. But if you're reclassing and going to the same school that you were attending previously,
That's
or public
hard.
school, then you just got jumped by everybody in your class. So that is a hard thing from a social standpoint. When you think about it.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Yeah.
But again, I think as you and I have both gone through this, it was the right move for us. That is definite. And if anybody were to ask me that, I tell them all the time, that was the best decision I made for my son.
Remember, the private schools, a lot of people go to the private schools for the specific purpose of playing sports.
Yep.
And administrators don't want to hear this because it's always about the school first. But reality is when you're going to high school to play sports, you're going to high school to play sports.
That's exactly what it is.
So,
you can't sugarcoat that.
So I have to tell you, I always fashioned myself a smart guy. And I played football, basketball, and baseball at Poly Prep. This year, my mom found my report card, my entire transcript from high school, and she gave it to me. And I brought it home and I showed Dennis. I said, "Hey, Dennis, you want to see something funny? Take a look." He looked at my high school transcript. He said, "Dad, I thought you were a smart guy." I said, "I like to think I am." He said, "You did awful in high school. All these C minuses. What is this? C minus? Oh, you ever got a C minus?
You're
You
like,
have
I'm
my
playing
head."
sports. You're like, I'm playing
I
sports.
said, "Dennis," I said, "I always thought I did really well in high school. I was a cut above, but the reality was I was playing football, basketball, and baseball.
Yeah,
And those were
hard.
what did I major in high school? I majored in football, basketball, and baseball. That's what it was. But it is interesting how we do have different focuses. And Dennis is in college now, and I told him this year, Dennis, I want to tell you, your grade point average is a hell of a lot more important than your batting average. He says to me, "Dad, you've been telling me that for 5 years." I said, "Yeah, but Dennis, this time I actually mean it."
Like, it means something now, man.
And that's the truth. In high school, the committed dads, the one thing about the Don Bosco dads, all like crazy committed
Oh, yeah.
baseball guys. That's what I loved about it, that I was not the only baseball nut in the group. I was one of many. It was mixed nuts. And that's a fact. There's one guy crazier than the next, which I loved. They're all great guys, too.
That's crazy.
So, but at the end of the day, you do what you have to do to get your kid through it. One last thing I want to focus on for a second is recruiting. The high school recruiting, what are the rules, what should happen, and what does happen? Can you speak about that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it simple, right? So they changed the rules, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. So parochial schools are allowed to recruit, and public schools are doing it too, by the way. Parochial coaches are allowed to recruit kids up to 8th grade. So as long as they have not entered a high school, everyone's fair game. So I can approach anybody. Most of the time, we do things a little differently just because we want to make sure we're on the up and up with the NJSIAA. We, especially at Bosco, we have a lot of people that reach out to us first, right? And then we go into it. But ultimately, we're allowed to go and recruit, watch games, do anything we want to do up to 8th grade, meaning like as long as they haven't entered a high school yet. Once they get into high school, the only way that you can talk to an athlete is they must reach out to you. So like as a coach, I could see a high school kid, I can't go talk to him. Okay? Which again, now the mayhem is all middle school.
So you can't, you're a coach at St. Anne's, you can't go up to a kid who plays for St. Thomas and says, "Hey, I really like the way you play.
No
you
way.
come to my school, you're starting first baseman."
No way.
That's
no way.
verboten.
No. But if that kid reaches out to the coaching staff, right, and says, "Hey, listen, I like your program. I'm interested. I'm looking at transferring." The next thing that would happen there immediately from our side is it goes to our admissions director, right? They handle it first. There's a big process for anybody from high school to high school, right? So we kind of focus on up to 8th grade, and then anything over and above that, those kids reach out to us. But again, there's a huge process. And again, we're very good at that because laws are laws and we want to stick to it because we're not looking to break anything. And it's hard for a program like us because we get a lot of kids who inquire, right? Runes is he's stacked 1,000 emails deep about kids that want to go to Bosco.
This 3 state championship in 4 years.
Yeah.
You become the place to go. I assume that there's more interest now in Bosco than there ever has been.
Yeah. Listen, when you show up at a state game and you got Timmy Corbin from Vanderbilt and all these coaches from Wake everywhere, they're standing around, you got 30 scouts. You don't see that very often, right? I'm sure Del Barton, any of these teams, Joe's, Bergen, any of these teams that are winning at that point, coaches are showing up. But I'm going to tell you right now, I will tell you right now, as I sit here, I've been at Bosco for 15 years. It's taken us that long, Skip, to build this powerhouse, probably over the last 10 years. Every county game, every state game, even midweek games, there are college coaches there. Think about that. They don't just show up anywhere, right? There's a reason for that.
And sometimes they see a kid who they're not spotlighting. They see a kid and he just stands out for a particular game or particular play, and that's how it works.
Absolutely. There's a check. Let's go take a look at this guy, or invite him to a camp, and that's how it works. That's That's how it works. But again, getting back to the rules, we can recruit to 8th grade. High school, we stay away from unless they come to us. That's how it works.
And if a coach, if you want a particular school as a parent, should you go contact the coach directly as a parent when if your kid is an 8th grade baseball player and he's good and he wants to go to a school, do you go as a parent and talk to that coach?
Yeah, so what I would do is all the schools offer open houses, right? And for us, like I know Skip's always there. Like one of us, like we're always there, right? Some of our players are
There's
there.
open houses, and all the coaches are present at those open houses. So if they have the hockey coach, they have the football
They got
coach,
everybody.
they have the basketball coach and the baseball coach.
And you can get information from the admin. And not only that, but usually for our open house, there's clubs, like a bunch of clubs there, right? Fishing club, whatever. So like you really want to get to know what you're getting into. Again, same question. Everybody always shows up. What's it going to take to start here? Is my kid going to play? How good do you have to be?
But you realize that threshold question, was my kid going to be able to start here? It's a question that cannot be answered when your kid is 8th grade.
Cannot be answered.
And because the kid at 13 is not going to be the kid at 17.
Nope.
And I valued Mike's candor when I asked that question. I have to tell you, I wonder what I would have done if he had blown smoke of my ears. I would have, I think, doubted the answer. I liked the fact that he was candid and didn't make any promises. But I assume when you're making that commitment as a parent, deciding whether or not to send your kid to a private school, there's a cost to it too. I mean, private schools are not free. There's a value add that you got to dip into your pocket for quite a significant amount of money. And and if you're doing it for your kid to play sports, and he goes there and winds up not playing, sometimes you wonder how much bang are you getting for your buck.
There's, again, it's like a big puzzle, right? And you got to fill it in, and you got to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Again, everything that you and I have talked about on this podcast, talking about kids and their sports life. As parents, we have to understand that there's an investment, right? Whether it's going to be training, whether it's going to be school, whatever we decide, right? Because we make the decisions that are best for our kids. But the pressure that comes along with the investment on the parent side is always there. And that doesn't matter if you make, 10 grand a year or you make $1 million a year, right? There's always, whenever you're laying out that kind of cash, you want to know that you're getting the most bang for your buck, as you would say. Making the right decisions, and I understand why parents come to me at the open houses and ask these questions, because they're picking my brain, right? To be like, can I just figure out if coach is like, can he hint if my kid? No, you know what I'm saying?
Just a little mini hint.
You know what I'm saying? Like, does he have a shot?
If he's gonna play, give me 2 winks and a clap.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Oh, by the way, do you know who else is coming in? Do you know the roster? Do you know? I'm like, no, dude, I don't know. They're gonna show up. We're gonna see them. Like we see a lot of kids at summer camp, right? That are showing up on the field. But again, you have to do the research. You have to do your homework. And again, as a parent, I would just take a look at depending on where my kid is, like athletically, I would just look at what is in front of him.
But Joe, that's the thing too. Nothing is ever guaranteed. You could have a really good shortstop, and he goes in and is recruited by Don Bosco, goes in to play there, is dead set on playing shortstop, and all of a sudden,
he's a center fielder.
All of a sudden, Nicky Becker signs up for Bosco, and your kid's not playing shortstop anymore.
Well, that's what I'm saying. People ask us this, right? Cap, they ask us, and I'm like, I don't know what's coming in yet.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? I've seen kids at camp, but I don't know the unknown, right? So, but people, I get it. They want what's best for their kid, but
they also want certainty, and you're asking
guarantees
for certainty and guarantees in a land of uncertainty.
You get right there.
Nothing is certain in life except death and taxes.
That's it, man.
So
that's it. So look, just do your homework. I tell the parents out there and the kids, do some homework. Make sure whatever programs that you are looking at, like if they're not public, even if they are public, go watch them play. Go watch the coaches, right? Take a look at the atmosphere, the culture. The culture is crucial, right? Is that what you want to be a part of? Like we always talk about the brotherhood. That's important. Be educated before you make any decisions. Because the only thing that happens is when you're not educated and you make the decision and it's not the right one, all you're going to do is badmouth the school and the coaching staff, and they had nothing to do with it. You ultimately made the decision. You were just unprepared, right? And then at the same time, you were probably unrealistic that there are other kids that are going to show up that are going to be just as good as little Johnny or better. You just have to know that going into it.
Or perceived as such by the
Or
coaches.
perceived as. That's definitely what it comes down to.
And baseball's it's a subjective game. You might look at one kid as a catcher behind the plate, and you're a former catcher, say, hey, this kid's the best catcher I've seen in the area. The next coach could look at the kid and say, oh, he's okay, but I like this kid better. And
that's how it happens.
And especially at a school, a prominent private school in New Jersey, any of them, really, Bosco, Del Barton, any of the top schools, you're going to have that. You're going to have really good kids who have different skill sets, and they're all competing with each other, and one kid's going to light up one coach, and another kid might light up another coach. The question is, who's the coach making the final decisions? And that's really how it is. It's a very uncertain game. But like I said, we talked about this last week a little bit. The one thing I will say is that the kids on that team, they all buy in. The Don Bosco kids all bought in. And by the time that season was over in 2025, they were running on the field as state champions. You could not tell from the faces who was the all-league player, who was the future major league player, and who was the last guy on the bench. They all had the same look on their faces.
Well, winning solves a lot of issues.
It was remarkable. And something I'll remember that. I remember the look of 25 kids screaming out of the dugout with pure joy on the faces. And that was a beautiful thing.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I think I was screaming just as loud as everybody else.
I'm sure. With your voice, I have no doubt.
Oh, that's funny. I keep hitting myself with this thing in the face. I got to move it a little bit.
I don't know if you know that before that last game, I was there about an hour and a half before the game. I was there before the bus came.
You were sitting in the top right-hand corner of the bleacher.
I'm not going to miss my seat.
I remember we showed up. We were watching the other games, right? I'm like, yo, is that Kev? He's sitting right there. He's ready to go. And then everybody else started filing in, right? The other teams started going. I was like, he's locked in, ready to go.
I had the blue and white shoes rolling. I was ready to go.
That was awesome.
So
that was tremendous.
Too much fun. But I hope for the audience that you've learned a little bit about the decisions being made regarding private school, public school, the difficult decisions making. The difficulty in making decisions regarding what school your kid's going to go to, where he's going to play, and the fact that life is uncertain, and certainly high school baseball and other high school sports are uncertain too. Nothing's guaranteed, but the journey's well worth it if you persevere, in my mind. This has been a fun episode. I will tell the viewers that I'm not sure exactly when, but we're going to have Jim Wadika from Wadika Baseball Club, pitching coach for Don Bosco Prep, is going to be on to talk about the college recruiting process for high school baseball players. And Jim is extraordinarily gifted and committed to kids and really has helped, I think, hundreds of kids get good college positions and roles in college programs through sheer effort on his part. And the fact that when Jim Wadika tells a coach about a kid, the coach credits his assessment because Jim is a straight shooter and he touts kids who are good kids and good players, and his credibility is unmatched, I believe. Joe, again, this is a lot of fun. I always enjoy this. The viewers, I say, keep moving forward. Until next time, signing off. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Forward. If today's conversation helped you, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about developing better athletes and better people. Forward is a Hard Knock Press publication where we're building books, conversations, and ideas that challenge conventional thinking and help people grow. Until next time, keep moving forward.